Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to be reviewing the new KOALA No Seal Needed Waterslide paper. To get started, we have to print our image out onto our waterslide paper. I'm using my print to size app, measured the dimensions of my tumbler, and just resized it in the app to print that size. I made sure that it was printing in color and photo setting so it would be nice and saturated with those colors, and got that printed out. KOALA brand sent this to me to give it a try, and I was really excited that I did not have to use spray paint. This, as you could see, can be used in inkjet and laser printers, and it's supposed to absorb the ink so that it is not necessary to use can on top of can of matte clear spray paint. Now, I did try to cut it with my vinyl cutter, and the paper it's almost just like a piece of thicker cardstock. So it didn't want to cut it really well. Could be because my blade was not sharp enough. So I just took my scissors and trimmed off the excess edges around my image. In first impression, I was really amazed at the quality of the image, and as you can see, I rubbed my hand across it after about 5 minutes of drying, and none of the ink is coming off. So the real test would be to saturate it in water, since we have a water slide, and see if any of that ink starts to bleed while applying it to our tumbler. Now, since we are using a white water slide instead of clear, the clear is actually still in development. They have only come out with the white water slide as of right now. But since it is white, we do not have to have a glossy surface to put this on. So I am using a 24-ounce plump from the Steel Magnolia, just prepped with some matte white spray paint. I have some lukewarm water set to the side in a big bowl, and I'm just going to completely submerge the water slide in the water. I did go back a couple of times and just rub over the image just to see if any of that ink is coming off, and it at this point had not. So I did wet the tumbler, and to test the durability, because that is a big deal for me, I have to reposition my water slides a lot to get them straight. So the durability of the water slide is very important, because there's nothing more frustrating than printing, cutting, and sealing the other water slide brands and putting them on your tumbler and them ripping or just pretty much crumbling apart. As you can see, I peeled the entire thing off of the backing, and this stuff is pretty durable. I worked with it quite a bit and repositioned that, and did not have any tearing or ripping or crumbling going on. After it was dry, I did have a spot that I hit with one of my rings on the backside, so it chipped it just a little bit, but it was more of a chip rather than a rip or a tear that I normally get from other water slide brands. So I just squeegeed all of that water out from underneath the water slide while constantly putting it in place to make sure my seam is lined up perfectly. And then once I felt that I had the majority of the water out from underneath the water slide, I grabbed my tissue paper, as I normally do, to dry off the remaining parts and get the remaining water out from underneath it. Now, you can just stop at this point and allow it to air dry and just sort of babysit it just a little bit to make sure that none of your edges pop up. I always press them down with the tissue paper so that I can avoid having to constantly come back and see if it lifts from the top and the bottom rims. But when I went over with the tissue paper, some of the ink did come off. It appeared to just be the black ink, which I imagine, since I used photo setting, was highly saturated, but I mean, it didn't affect the quality of the image whatsoever. The picture was still bright and vibrant and didn't have any streakiness or blotchiness to it at all. To help further press those edges around the top and the bottom rim down, I always grab my heat gun and work with them just a little bit so when they're dry, they are adhered to the tumbler and they will not lift. I slowed this down just a little bit so you can see what I'm doing, and I believe the heat from the heat gun did cause it to shrink just a little bit. And of course I used DIY's Speedy Petey for my first coat of epoxy so I can get moving to the next step in the same day. And after I applied the epoxy, I stepped away for a few minutes, and when I come back, there were lots of micro bubbles. So after that spun for about 15 minutes, it was already pretty much set up. I went over with my torch lightly, so that's why you just saw all of those sort of like little dimples in the epoxy from where I just went back after it had started setting up and popped those surface bubbles. I have my Dawn Power Wash and some black spray paint. I'm going to completely cover the deer on the front side and then lightly go all over the remaining parts of the cup so that we can give this a little bit of a rustic look. You want to have your hose pipe nearby, a 5-gallon bucket of water, or of course you can take off running into your house like I normally do and run it under your sink. But as soon as you finish covering with that power wash, go straight into very lightly spraying with your spray paint. Now I did go back in with my power wash because I noticed that it was starting to sort of sink down to the bottom of my cup, and I didn't want to cover those antlers with my spray paint. And as soon as I finished my spray paint, I went straight in with the water and washed all of that power wash and excess spray paint off. I did notice that on the back side where my seam was, I wanted a little bit more coverage there because there is a little spot from where the water slide shrunk, and I wanted to cover that just a little bit with some more spray paint. So I completely covered the front so that I wouldn't have any overspray, and just lightly went over that Dawn Power Wash over that seam and resprayed that. I allowed this to dry completely before moving into my epoxy. And again, I am using Speedy Petey from DIY Epoxy. Speedy Petey is their fast set. It sets up in about 30 minutes, so I can turn my turners off or I can apply a second layer of epoxy, which is exactly what I did. And this cup was actually finished in 1 day. I started on this early in the morning, so I first did my water slide and gave that plenty of time to dry. Added on my first layer of fast set, and then after about 2.5 to 3 hours is when I moved in to applying the spray paint with power wash. Allowed that to dry completely, and then I was able to do my 2 final coats of epoxy, since this epoxy can be used as a final layer, and it was done by the afternoon. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we did use a 24-ounce plump from the Steel Magnolia. All of my 16s, 24s, and 32s I purchased from them. I get the regular lid, and then I grab some additional HydroFit lids so I can swap that over or give my customers the additional option to purchase the HydroFit lid as well. And it is a huge selling point, and my customers absolutely love it. So overall, I really loved this new KOALA no spray water slide paper. They were generous enough to send me 2 packs of it, so I want to give away a pack to y'all. Make sure that you are part of my Brittany Barnes Boutique Facebook group and go follow me on Instagram, and we will have a giveaway very soon for a pack of this awesome water slide paper. That is all for today. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.